my God, a new Chris Dangerfield video just came out. I can't wait to watch it.
Dangerfield. Hello people, interesting thread sent to me by a subscriber, thank you very much for that, about an experiment conducted in 1973 by Stanford psychologist David Rosenhan. Interesting that he was at Stanford, because Stanford of course is very infamous for its 1971 Stanford prison experiment, which had a little twist in the tail actually. It was a social psychological study into what happened when you took groups of people and gave some power and made the others powerless. It was considered irresponsible, very controversial for years, and yet years after that, decades after that, people involved in it came out and said that they kind of knew what was going on. They sort of played along a bit really, and it ended up, the truth be told, it was more like a piece of theatre than this sort of controversial, irresponsible prison experiment. Anyway, now this is about psychiatry. If you're familiar with my channel, you know that I don't believe in mental illness. This isn't something I just come up with, it's something I've been studying for years. It started when I read Jeffrey Sharler's book, Addiction is a Choice, and then a book by Thomas Saz, who Jeffrey Sharler was a student of, called The Myth of Mental Illness. And Jeffrey Sharler's been on my channel 3 times, so if you want to take a dive into why I don't believe in mental illness, any of them, ADHD, Tourette's, depression, schizophrenia, you name it, just search my channel for Jeffrey Sharler and you'll find those 3 videos. But let's have a look at this. So, could psychiatrists tell if someone was actually insane? Stanford psychologist David Rosenhan wanted to find the answer. In 1973, he sent 8 perfectly normal people to mental hospitals across the US. What he found out next exposed the secret side of psychology. Now, it's weird that he's gone from psychiatry to psychology, because they're 2 very different things. Psychiatry is a particular type of practice, and psychology is the study of behaviour, thoughts and feelings of individuals and groups. You know, it's more like an umbrella term. Regardless, I doubt Tuan Trung necessarily knows that. That's not what he's just trying to tell you the story. So there's some interesting photos there. So the next bit. David Rosenhan, a Stanford psychologist, designed a bold experiment to find out if psychiatry could tell if people were actually insane. He recruited 8 normal people willing to get themselves committed, that is, banged up in a psych ward. 1 painter, 1 housewife, 1 paediatrician, 1 psychiatrist, 3 psychologists, and Rosenhan himself. And these little infographics are not worth watching because they just repeat what has already been said. So their mission was to infiltrate hospitals, what we call mental hospitals, what were once called lunatic asylums. There was 5 in Dartford where I grew up, and one of them was called the Greater London Lunatic Asylum. Anyway, the pseudo-patients had simple instructions. Say you hear a voice saying empty or hollow. No other symptoms. Take detailed notes. Try to get out by convincing staff you're sane. So that's the instructions. Say you're hearing a voice saying empty or hollow. You've got nothing else going on. Take detailed notes and try and get out of the mental home, mental hospital, by convincing the staff you're sane. Okay. Then they scattered across 5 different states, walking into the, whoa, that seems to have worked right. Walking into the hospitals, each pseudo-patient told their real-life stories. Real names, real jobs, real families. The only lie? A voice saying empty. What happened next shocked even Rosenhan. It's a kind of imposing. You know, they used to put women who were married but pregnant into lunatic asylums. Okay, and they stayed there for the rest of their lives, by the way. You might want to look into that. All 8 were admitted immediately. The diagnosis, 7 were diagnosed with schizophrenia and 1 with manic depressive psychosis. Now, schizophrenia is an interesting one because when I've talked about my thoughts on psychiatry and I say I don't believe in ADHD and I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, I don't believe addiction is a disease, all this sort of stuff, people will always say, yeah, but schizophrenia is. You know, it's considered like the holy grail of psychiatry. And yet, when you ask a psychiatrist to define schizophrenia, they don't really have a definition. You know, what it essentially is, like in this example, someone's hearing voices. Okay, you've got schizophrenia. But people who don't have auditory hallucinations have also been diagnosed as schizophrenic. People who have no hallucinations whatsoever, not even visual or auditory, are called schizophrenic. You know, it's just like, it's one of those ones that it allows them to sort of diagnose people with a mental illness that doesn't, you know, check any of the boxes of all their other made up so-called diseases. Not a single doctor caught on, but the real nightmare was just beginning. Inside, the pseudo-patients maintained normal behaviour. They followed all the rules, they engaged in conversations, they took notes on their experience, they made friends with other patients. Yet everything they did was seen through the lens of illness. That will be the lens of mental illness, of psychiatry. Staff interpreted normal behaviour as symptoms. See, this is what psychiatry has done. It's not in this example, but in general, it's taken normal life's problems and turned them into psychiatric abnormalities. Life is a struggle. Life can make you feel depressed. Life can make you anxious. They're normal life struggles, but psychiatry has turned them into psychiatric abnormalities. Therefore, being able to give you a diagnosis, they've named it, they've classified it, and then they can treat you, usually with medication. So staff interpreted normal behaviours as symptoms. That's psychiatry in a nutshell. Anyway, writing notes, quotes, patient engages in compulsive writing behaviour. Being friendly, patient shows inappropriate affect. Being neat, quotes, patient exhibits obsessive tendencies. The label of insane coloured everything. And don't forget, people, you can get psychiatrists to give you, in a court of law, to get you off a murder case by saying you were temporarily insane. The insanity defence is ridiculous. Many people have not been sent to jail for heinous crimes because a psychiatrist said they were insane at the time. The most fascinating part, the actual patients, so the other patients in these psychiatric institutions, often saw through the act. 35 patients approached them saying variations of, "You're not crazy, you're a journalist or a professor checking on the hospital." Yet the highly trained professionals, completely fooled. The average stay lasted 19 days. The shortest, 7 days. The longest, 52. The only way out was to admit they were mentally ill and take powerful antipsychotic drugs. The drugs were secretly pocketed, but the numbers are staggering. 2,100 pills were prescribed in total. All were completely unnecessary, and some caused permanent side effects. The final diagnosis for release: schizophrenia in remission. Yay, we cured you of your schizophrenia. Remarkable. Life inside was dehumanizing. Staff avoided eye contact, questions were ignored, personal space violated, basic rights denied. One nurse recorded a pseudo-patient's behaviour. Patient engages in writing behaviour. What was he writing? The nurse's exact words. Wow. When Rosenhan published his findings in Science magazine, the psychiatric community erupted in outrage. One prestigious hospital challenged him. "Send your fake patients, we'll catch them." Rosenhan agreed. What happened next was incredible. So the psychiatric community, which thankfully has been under attack for a long time, and it deserves to be, it's an abomination. What, you know, 1 in 4 Brits in any given year has got a mental illness apparently. Now you go back 25 years, it was nothing like that. And there's 2 reasons for that. They've invented loads more so-called mental illnesses, this is a fact. And they've also made it easier to diagnose people with them. So whereas in the past, perhaps, to be diagnosed with a supposed mental illness, you'd need to check 10 boxes, they just made it easier to tell people they had a mental illness. So anyway, one prestigious hospital challenged him. "Send us your fake patients and we'll catch them." Rosenhan agreed. What happened next was incredible. Over 3 months, the hospital proudly reported catching 41 of the new 193 patients were imposters. So they caught 41 out of 193 new patients. The twist: Rosenhan hadn't sent anyone. Their fear of being fooled made them seek fake patients everywhere. I mean, the transparency of evil. This became known as the Rosenhan effect. Rosenhan said, "The facts of the matter are that we have known for a long time that diagnoses are often not useful or reliable, but we have nevertheless continued to use them. We now know that we cannot distinguish insanity from sanity." The study on being sane in insane places revolutionized psychiatry. It led to closing of many asylums, major diagnostic reforms, patients' rights movements, deinstitutionalization movement, and the creation of the modern DSM system, which I'm telling you now is not just as bad as this, it's far worse. It's far, far worse. It's incredible, the DSM system, out of the frying pan and into the active volcano of the myth of mental illness. Good Lord. I hope you enjoyed that, people. If you've got any questions for me, because I know this stuff can be quite painful, you know, when I'm saying there's no such thing as mental illness and you've got someone close to you, someone in your family or a lover or whatever, a child, and who's been diagnosed, you must think I'm talking absolute madness. Sorry, no pun intended. But leave questions in the comments and I'll be happy to reply in detail with links to resources. Look after yourselves, people. Don't go crazy out there. Ta-da!
This video, like, share and subscribe. Bye bye.
Sweet, sweet, sweet.